My name is Jane Brien. In case you didn't know, I'm the Director of Alumni Affairs at Bard. And if you got the email, you saw a picture of me and Leon back in 1989. So I've been around for a while. I'm really happy to have everybody be able to be here for this live chat with Leon. And we're going to be taking questions. I will be reading out some of the questions. But I first wanted to just start with welcome, Leon. Thank you for doing this. And
my pleasure. My pleasure.
And I wanted to first start with, how are you? Your microphone is muted, I think.
Yes.
There you go. Okay. So I wanted to know, you're at home. Obviously, you're there at Bard. And how's the family? How are you guys holding up? Anything you're watching on TV?
No, not so much. I mean, my son is here from graduate school, so he decided to hole up here, and Barbara's here, and we're just. My daughter is in Tivoli, and my other daughter is in Washington, and everybody seems to be fine, and we're holding up pretty well. It's very busy. There's a lot of virtual work. And the good thing is that people all are very nostalgic about being able to meet and be in person. I had an orchestra class with undergraduates, 63 undergraduates on Zoom. So the Zoom works reasonably well, and Blue Jeans works well. All these platforms seem to work out well. And we're just waiting. And we're in the process of recruiting a new class for 2024. And there can be some changes in the curriculum for the first year. We're thinking about a course that would be open to all students for the first years in the history and science of epidemics and infectious diseases. And so we're looking at ways to adjust to what may be very significant changes when the pandemic recedes to what people want to study and the things that opportunities that face us. So it's we're people optimistic. We have 300 students in dorms out of the.
Yeah, I wanted to know why you decided to let them stay. People have been asking that question.
Well, we have a large number of students from abroad, and 25% of our student body is Pell eligible. That comes from the bottom quarter of the American income scale. And these are students that didn't have really homes back to go back to, nor was it safe for them to travel. So our position was that their safety and well-being comes first, not the convenience of the institution. I took exception to many institutions that simply locked students out and told them to get out I just found that irresponsible. And so we provided a home and shelter for those students who to whom we had made that obligation ahead of time, and for whom it was neither safe nor possible to go home.
And how are they doing? You had any contact?
They seem great. They seem great. The student life staff here has been terrific. People at Bard have been just terrific. People are providing them essential services. The BNG group, the people who maintain the campus, counseling, and the faculty have been fantastic. I mean, everybody's online. Classes are meeting, and our goal is to make sure everybody, each individual, can complete the academic program by the end of 2020.
Okay. So when you talked about the epidemic, I've been thinking about, your parents were both doctors. What do you think they would make of what's going on right now?
Well, my father was an oncologist, so it was less up his alley. My mother was one of the world's experts in polio and wrote for what Europe was the major book on the differential diagnosis and treatment of polio. So she led the strategy for the great polio epidemics of the 40s in Zurich, Switzerland. So she was a real expert on these kinds of epidemics in viruses, especially polio had, like coronavirus, silent carriers, people who shed the virus, transmitted it, but were not symptomatic. So someone like Franklin Roosevelt did not represent 100% of people infected with the virus. And apparently, people don't know that, like coronavirus, the density of infection had something to do with the symptoms that emerged. So she would have been, this would have been very familiar territory. We grew up with, stories of her actual heroism in the epidemics of the 40s when we were in Switzerland.
We have a question. Somebody wanted to know, our class is actually meeting, she's written IRL, which is in real life, and they're all online. Is that correct, Leon?
Yeah, everything is online. The music ones are the most painful because that's like theater and dance, and the area I know best. It's very hard to do something constructive virtually, but we're trying. There are no group meetings. There are a couple of the single practice rooms are open on campus. We have a practice building on campus, and they have single practice rooms, and they're available because they are safe. And I imagine there are probably 1 or 2 students who are playing 6 feet apart, music for 2 instruments or 3 instruments, 6 feet apart. But basically, there's no in real life instruction, no.
I heard from one of your professors who said that actually sometimes watching a student play the viola, which is her instrument, online, she can see things that she hadn't been able to see before. So I guess there's some.
Oh, there is. What's interesting, Jane, is that actually that using this technology in the crisis will allow us to use the technology better as a component of in real life learning, as you put it. And so we're going to learn a lot about what does and doesn't work.
So it seems to me that Bard being small, nimble, and flexible has been a real benefit for us.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard stories about other schools where they've got 300 people in an online class,
Yes, there's no doubt that scale is a tremendous advantage, and there is an unintended consequence that teaching at the scale that we do may in fact turn out to be very resilient. I mean, be a powerful option. The other thing is that big institutions like the state universities, or more importantly, the rich private institutions, they are giant corporations, which means that for them to make a decision about classes or about teaching or about events, that it's much easier to cancel. So let's say in the music field, Carnegie Hall has closed down till the opening of its season in October. That's not a health decision. That's not a decision to help musicians who are one of the most vulnerable among the professions in New York City. And it is convenient. It's cheaper to close, just cheaper to close. And and they have no business because there's no demand for the hall. So it's understandable. So our being small is like, there's a comparison between a giant ship that's somehow marooned in the middle of an ocean, and turning it around is a near impossible task. If you're a small sailboat, turning around is a lot easier, and there's much more maneuverability. So, we always want to be elephants, but there's a time when it's good to be a mouse.
Right. Well, that makes sense. We do have a question from Jill Christensen, who's from the class of '98. She runs a relief organization, which is called Day One Disaster Relief. And she's asking some questions about, does BARD have masks? Do we have access to ventilators? Is there a plan for students who get sent home or who gets sick?
Perfectly good question. So we have a COVID-19 response team. It's made up of about 7 people. Malia Dumont, who's on the line, is a member of it. And we meet regularly with the county health officials and the head of clinical services at Northern Dutchess Hospital. And we're in touch with the state, with Governor Cuomo's office on a regular basis. As you probably know, Jill, the student body, the age group of our student body, barring those with pre-existing conditions, is the population least at risk for the acute respiratory distress complication of the coronavirus, which is the most fatal. We have no respirators or no equipment on campus. We are completely tied in to Northern Dutchess Hospital. And in this part of Dutchess County, both Ulster and Dutchess, the number of cases as of yesterday here in the county was about 700, with about 9 fatalities, all of them very many very, very elderly people, and one of them beyond college age, late 20s, early 30s, with a pre-existing condition. So our situation is that we have a very rapid access to the healthcare facilities in the region. And one of the reasons we would have had on the total bar student population is a little over 2,000, including everybody who lives in Tivoli and Red Hook and so forth. And what remains on campus is 25% of that, 300 on campus, about 200 off campus. And so our obligation was to reduce the density of the population so that even though our population was a low risk population, we did not want to overwhelm the emergency care and ICU and care that would have been available in Northern Dutchess. You can actually read in the New York Times an account by the television critic of the New York Times, whose name I don't remember, but he wrote an op-ed piece about his experience having COVID-19 and getting in distress. I'm guessing he's a man in his 50s. And how excellent the care he got was. And the care was at Northern Dutchess Hospital. When you read the article, you discovered he was in Rhinebeck and he went to Northern Dutchess Hospital, and how great the nurses were and all. And the head of medicine there is a old friend of the colleges and someone I've known for a long time. And so we're in close contact, and knock wood, God forbid someone should get into a severe illness. We've had several staff who have had the virus and have had very mild symptoms and have now recovered. A couple who have now exceeded the post-symptomatic quarantine, have remained quarantined, obviously. So that's our story there.
We had a question that came in yesterday. Somebody said if it's possible to, putting politics aside, which I think is a tall order, but what do you think about the federal response to what's been going on? Do you have any thoughts? I think we can't hear you for 1 second. I'm not sure. Is there? I'm not sure if we can. I don't know. He's not muted. Is he, Steve?
Okay, I'm off the mute.
You're back.
Am I back? Yeah.
And he's back.
So the host muted me. That's what my prompt says. So I'm now unmuted. So the question is the political response. So I have to say, without rancor, that the president is a mendacious, incompetent, and a real threat to the republic. And his behavior in this is not only negligent, but dishonest. At the core of it is his embrace of an anti-science agenda in order to curry favor with his own ignorance and the evangelical right. So they cut funding in the infectious disease area, both in the NIH and NSF, and they, as they show in the environmental area, have no regard for science. And then there is a kind of brutal, simplistic hostility to government and a belief in the virtues of profit and the private sector, whose absence of concern for the public good is astonishing. And so he has left America unprepared for this kind of event, which was a kind of disaster scenario for which the federal government should have been prepared. And then all the posturing and alienating of allies. Even if taking a hard line with China on trade may have been a good idea, since the supply chain in medicine, pharmaceutical, and medical equipment is so heavily dependent, you can't play theatrical games with essential services. And so 3M makes masks in China. It doesn't make masks in Minnesota. So if you know that, you've got to do your politics with a view to the safety of your citizens. So we could not have a worse federal government. Thank God for the remnants of the professional bureaucracy. Anthony Fauci, as you know, maybe many of you remember, got an honorary degree from Bard.
Yep.
25 years ago, or something like that. But so Fauci and those people are good. Our own governor, who has been actually a very good colleague in the prison work, without Governor Cuomo's support, the whole prison program in New York State would not have flourished. And he has shown himself to be extremely gifted in relating to this event. One of our alumni, Sarah Payton, works for the governor, is actually involved in obtaining ventilators and equipment, works in the governor's office. And one of our alumnus's wife is the governor's chief of staff. So that's worked very well. We have many of you know, we have a bunch of Bard High School early colleges in 6 cities. So we have pretty good contact with the mayors of New York, Newark, Baltimore, Washington, Cleveland, and New Orleans. And I think all those, cities have mayors, some of them better than others, who have tried to handle the enormous burden that the closing of school systems has had. Right. What we don't realize is that, it's all very well for those of us who are privileged to say, well, we'll work at home. How does a single parent work at home that doesn't have a computer and has 3 children coming home from school?
Yeah.
Who's taking care of that? Who makes that possible? I mean, there's a lot of, and the other, so I'm very critical of the president and of Mitch McConnell and the Republicans. I can think of no worse government. The other thing that I'm critical of is the media, including the mainstream media, who simply they pontificate, but they don't actually articulate the severity of the problem, particularly for the poor and the underserved. In this, online, there is a technology gap which corresponds to an income gap. And I fear for the enormous devastation economically when this is all over, and socially. And it could be that the Democrats are so incompetent as to fail to exploit this failure in order to achieve the return of a more competent government.
Yes, well, I think probably everybody online will agree with that, but I shouldn't presume. You mentioned the high schools and the prison. Is there anything that obviously the folks in prison do not have access to the internet anyway, and now they can't have anybody come in and teach them. I'm sure BPI has been doing a lot to try and ameliorate that. It's muted. Hold on, we need to unmute, sorry.
Okay, tell whoever's running this not to mute me, to try to, I'll do it myself.
Okay.
Yeah, so the PPI, so yes, you're right, but the worst thing about the BPI is that the prisons are like nursing homes. They are really, for the spread of these diseases, a terrible place. And in our case, BPI is, most of BPI students of the 300 in New York are in medium or maximum security prisons. So they're not the kind of prisoner for whom release is an easy social solution for the government. So we're worried about them, and Max is doing a great job, and Megan and the BPI folks are doing a great job with it. And high schools we're just working with the public systems.
You talked about the crisis and the science behind it. I don't know that everybody knows about what we do with citizen science. Wasn't a coronavirus one of the things they were studying a few years ago, or maybe you could just explain what that is? I don't think our moderator, he's gonna get you back.
Okay, I'm back. We have many of the alumni. I know we have a citizen science program, which is in January, similar to L&T. And for years, it was on infectious disease. It has turned to water, but it does actually attempt to prepare students to understand the issues should such an event take place, which it now has. But as I said earlier, there's going to be a new course floated in the fall, which also includes the literature, that is to say, things like Boccaccio, the Decameron, and past literary and artistic responses to the history of epidemics in the past.
Okay. So there's quite a lot of alumni out there that I've been hearing from who, somebody's one woman from the class of 2000s, an infectious disease doctor at Montefiore in the Bronx. We have people who are working in public health, working in policy, nurses, and also people who are sort of helping with the effort, like we talked about Jill, and people making masks and things. Do you think that sort of BARD is a good training place for people who are, the critical thinking is something that's going to be able to help people at these times, the value of that?
The answer, interesting question. So yes, I mean, generally an educated citizenry. What I predict is the following: that there will be an increase after this is over in BARD undergraduates who want to study medicine and go into biomedical and related service professions. Two, we already have a program with Rockefeller. We have a public health undergraduate major already, and that will grow. And we have internships in New York City with global health issues. BARD, as you know now, is the leading organizer of something called the Open Society University Network, which links institutions around the around the world, and public health, and is a major part. We're also part of a consortium now that's looking at expanding BARD's role in floating programs in collaboration with health providers in the Hudson Valley, training programs for everything from nurse practitioners to physician's assistants to people who wish to enter medical school. And we've been long in discussion with the city of New York, which I think will now accelerate, for the creation of a third BARD high school in the Bronx in collaboration with the Einstein College of Medicine. And that would be actually in the long term located inside the hospital complex, where there's a public school system with an access to a BARD AA, free of tuition. Kids in the city of New York from disadvantaged backgrounds would have access to a high school and AA degree program in the hospital with a bias to the biomedical to science, and then have access to a BA from BARD, and then go on to Einstein for medical school. So these programs, which we've had in the pipeline before the pandemic struck, will take on new urgency, and I think BARD will be able to play a positive role in improving public health awareness, public health preparedness, and also because the country is going to be terribly short by 2030 of doctors and caregiving personnel in the biomedical area.
Okay. Well, I think we're sort of getting to the end here. I haven't had another question, but my question has come up from lots of people. You know, what can the alumni want to be involved? They want to know what's going on, which I hope this helped with. But also, what can they do? What can they do to help? What can they do to help BARD? What can they do to help in general? Do you have any message for them?
Well, it's a very good question. The message is first of all to take care of yourselves. That taking care of yourself and taking care of your neighbor is the same thing. An alumnus, I see Peter Irwin asked the question, how many of our own students have the virus? It's hard to know. The testing is so unavailable. A testing site was only set up in Kingston a week ago, and people don't get the results for 18 days. It's a catastrophe. So there's no good evidence of who has it, who doesn't have it. Of self-reported cases, we have in our staff and faculty, I'm guessing fewer than 5 reported cases. As Peter also knows, in people reporting symptoms, several have turned out to be normal flu or colds and have tested negative when they've actually gone for a test. So the data is unreliable. But in answer to your question, what alumni can do, number one is just stay safe. The second is and there's so much cynicism about institutions like ourselves, especially since we're always asking for money and we always need money. So I'll put it as bluntly as I can. The very rich colleges, the Grinnells, the Bowdens, the Williamses and Amherst, they can hibernate. They can close, hole up in a cave, and emerge and start up with everything blazing, because they have a giant trust fund that may have shrunk by 30%, but it's still giant. If you have a $2 billion endowment, the tragedy is that you only wake up with $1.5 billion. BARD will make it, but it will make it because it continues to do things that are necessary and important, particularly in the arts and in its commitment to a certain kind of intellectual rigor, and as well as the commitment to the arts. And we, of course, are applying for all the federal support, and we have a very generous board. And I want to congratulate our chair, who's an alumnus, Jim Chambers, for his extraordinary leadership and generosity in this crisis. And I am grateful to him and to the many alumni on the board. But this is the time to realize that your alma mater is unique in its contribution to the public good, that it is seen by thousands and thousands of inner city parents, by relatives of prisoners, by the community here in the Hudson Valley as an essential and vital part of what is worth fighting for. And therefore, it merits your support. It's not an irrelevant, outdated place. And it will play a role in reshaping what's normal afterwards. You know, the thing that occurred to me is people say, I'd love to come back to normal. And my response is, the normal wasn't so great. You know, starting with politics, you know, let's take this chance to make the normal better. And we have a role to play in that. And the faculty have been terrific. And the staff have been terrific. And the alumni need to protect the place, because the place will doesn't have a trust fund and never did, and it needs to keep going, which means there's some places that cancel commencement, cancel a summer course, as I say, decide to hibernate. We're not going to hibernate. We're going to adjust to what the law and the state mandates, but we want to be in the leadership in reconstituting education, in reconstituting an artistic and cultural life, and we want to be ready when travel and gathering resumes. And so we're going to keep going and keep fighting for the values that we think are essential.
That's great. That's great. Okay, we did just get one sort of longer question. I'm going to read it to you. But the other thing I did want to, you sent out something about admissions and for Hudson Valley resident. Is that what came out today? This new admission news. I want everybody who's listening to know that.
So it has become apparent, this is the season, as many of you who may be parents, or even some of you are grandparents or siblings of people who are now the age of college seniors and have applied to college. So Bard has become a very desirable place to go to college, and we have Mackie Sebens, who is an alumna herself, has been the director of admission now 2 or 3 years, and we have done very well. So we've accepted out of our applicant pool a group of young people, and we're now in the process of recruiting a class. What's become apparent is that the COVID virus pandemic has changed some attitude to travel far away from home, particularly airline travel, or train or bus travel. So there is a group of, there are 3 things happening at once. Number one, given the huge unemployment, a high school graduate who thought, well, I'm not going to go to college because I'm going to get a job, I'm going to go out there, and there are no jobs. So suddenly, for the kid that is just graduating high school that has no skills and no background, going to college looks like the best of, not an alternative that student would have thought about, but now it looks realistic. because there are no jobs. That happened in the Depression as well. So there might be an upsurge, but that upsurge will only influence a local community. The second is our people who decide to go to college, but I'm not going to go to Stanford. I'm not going to go to Pomona. I live in Westchester. I live in Putnam County. And I got accepted to Reed. I got accepted to Pomona. I got accepted to Stanford. I'm not going to go halfway. My parents don't want me to go. And then there are, so those populations, so we have opened up Hudson Valley for the Hudson Valley counties. That's Putnam, Greene, Ulster, Dutchess, Columbia. A new application opportunity that's a result of the crisis for young people who are reluctant to start their college careers at some distance and would like to start it at Bard. They may stay all 4 years, or they may decide to go on to the college that they had their eyes on after a year. So we've opened up a special scholarship, especially for underserved populations where the family never considered going to college because the high school graduate was expected to work. And now that work is not going to be out there. And so we have offered a local, a new scholarship opportunity.
That's great. I'm sure they'll be very glad to hear that. I think this is the last question. I think.
How long do we go to? What's our time?
Well, we've been on for about half an hour. I was planning to go to about 45 minutes. And I think we can do this again. I think this is a nice way.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, Jane, we can go till. I have nowhere to go, so I'm happy.
You're not going for a walk out there.
I'm not going for a walk. No.
Okay, so this is from Serena Caffrey, and she says, Naomi Klein, among others, have pointed out the dangers of corona capitalism, that the world we're living in is the dream of billionaire CEOs behind the technologies we are now depending. Do you have thoughts about abstaining or striking from these services and the moral imperative for local mutual aid networks?
Well, I have to say, I'm not sure I understood the question. Serena's question, it has so much ideological conviction embedded in it that I don't want to argue with, and I don't claim to understand. Do I believe that this coronavirus epidemic is a conspiracy of technology companies? No. Do I believe that the technology companies will gain an outsized profit from this, including Facebook? Yes. Am I a fan of capitalism? No. Do I think capitalism is an ethical system? No. Do I think that a different set of rules about the accumulation of wealth and monopoly positions in the delivery of services, that a different policy is required? Yes. Do I believe that individual civil disobedience? I would have wished individual civil disobedience before this virus against the cruelty of our government's policy toward immigration and on the border in the South. I would have hoped our country would have had the courage of a kind of general strike to protect ourselves from the inhumanity of the government's policy to people who are neighbors and our fellow neighbors, and who have the protection as envisaged by the Declaration of Independence, who speak about the rights of persons, not of citizens. And so I would have liked, during the first 3 Trump years, much more individual in the sense of the spirit of nonviolent resistance to unjust things. But I don't think that these devices are saving lives trust me, anybody who delivers medical services now knows that without rapid computation and rapid communication, more people would die than there now. So while I can sympathize with what I understand to be the critique, it's not, this is not, I do think we need to consider different arrangements that put us not at the mercy of these giant corporations like Amazon, Google, and of the and I think our psychic dependence on these machines may have been burned out by this coronavirus epidemic. I'm an optimist. I don't think people, I love Jane. I would prefer to see her in real life. I would prefer to laugh with her and drink with her and hang out with her in real life. You know, I'm not going to have a Zoom cocktail hour with Jane, you know, much as I like her, right? And for a musician, the kids, our music students, suffer from the inability. We were in the midst of rehearsing Alumni, you know, and the joy of 80 undergraduates on stage working together. I mean, that theater production, dance productions, discussions in real life. So I'm not sure the devices are going to, they may lose some of their addictive function.
Right. Yeah. Well, I was worried. Somebody said that all the Zoom calls have been being hacked with pornography. So I hope that hasn't happened during our call. The other part of her question was about local mutual aid networks. I think the CCE has been doing a really good job with getting people to all be helping each other and working with Red Hook. Do you know anything about that? You can't hear me? You can hear me? We can't.
I can hear you now. I can.
Okay,
Okay, now I'm here. So Erin Canaan deserves particular credit. She has organized a volunteer and service provision. So we're trying to bring music into the homes of people who are in old age homes and assisted living facilities. We're trying to help with the public schools virtually. So we have actually we have an extremely active volunteer operation, which the Center for Civic Engagement has organized. The answer is yes, and that extends to Kingston and to the whole Hudson Valley.
Okay. Myra Armstead, wonderful history professor, my former advisor, wanted to know about the local students, whether they'll be expected to live on campus or can they commute? They want.
Okay, so to Myra's question, I want to thank Myra for her help. She's one of our best colleagues. I think probably it's hard to predict. I think they can commute from home. They won't be required to live on campus. No, I think it's a matter of choice and a matter of economics for them and for us. For us, it's a little easier, especially if there's a great high need in the family. It's a lot easier for them to remain at home. So commuting from home is definitely going to be an option.
I wanted to ask a little bit about the arts at Bard. It's one of our pillars. Where do you see that in a sort of post-COVID time? What's the importance of the arts?
Well, look, the arts are the poor stepchild of in a way, of American public funding ever since the Depression, since the WPA. So in this moment of crisis, we are not a priority. And everyone fears for the performing arts. Jacob's Pillow has just canceled its festival. So Bard has to play a leadership role, in my view, in defending the role of the arts in a free society. And not only here, but through the OSUN, through the Open Society University Network. So I think we have a leadership role to play. I was pleased to see that Stephen Shore is in today's New York Times. He's one of the photographers who was interviewed and showed his work of how he works, in a quarantined environment. And I think the visual arts have a little bit of a better, they're better placed to use the technology effectively. So my own efforts are going to be concentrated on the future of performing artists, for whom audiences and collective performances are essential to their art form. There's no replacement. The other thing, of course, I think that places that will be in trouble are mainline churches and synagogues, is religion. That I think they worry about after COVID is over. Who's going to go to church? Who is going to take communion? Who is going to resume a collective religious life as opposed to an individual religious life? And the whole question of how to constitute community without contact, without fear of contact, it'll wear off. But there are opportunities. The arts are very much an endangered audiences. So let's say in our own case, Summerscape happens, let's say in a truncated form or some way, but it will, and we put on a production of a play or a dance performance. It's people are going to come. A concert, are people going to feel safe to go into a room of 500 people? How long will it take before the fear of gathering together wears off?
Have you yourself been out? Have you been to the grocery store or anything?
I've been to the grocery store once, and I've been to the pharmacy once, and no, but I don't go out much in the first place, except the thing that I miss most is the music making. That's the thing I miss most. The rest is, work in your office. I miss the personal contact. I'm very glad to have most of my family with me. It would be a lot harder alone. I feel very poorly for those who are alone, and I feel so. I'm blessed in that regard. But no, I don't. Maybe when the weather gets better.
Right. So you haven't been walking around campus?
No, I have not been walking around campus. No.
Okay. Well, I think this was a really great thing to do. It was really fun, from my library to yours, and I appreciate your time, and we all appreciate.
I'm happy to do it. I want the alumni to know that they're terribly important, and they're going to be more important as communities of loyalty stick together in hard times. And this is a valuable place. It's become, a politician said to me last week, when there's a lot of concern among small private colleges about how to survive this crisis. New York State has dozens of them all over upstate New York, and the East and the Midwest particularly are densely populated by institutions. And and in this conversation, a colleague said, you have a singular advantage. And I said, what was that? I said, you're more than a small private college. You have an outsized importance because of the high schools, the prisons, the arts, and the international work. So, and there's real truth in that. And I think that our commitment to public service and to education beyond what many of you are familiar with, that is the quality and character of a Bard undergraduate curriculum here in Annandale, that leadership shown by the college and run by wonderful people, many of them alumni, Dumaine Williams, Val Thompson, Max Kenner, that these activities of the college have drawn terrific faculty and staff, and that has made the college an important institution, which is why several of our donors have been as generous as they have, not only in the recent past, and letting us operate and break even every year, but now we're in the midst, gearing up for a capital campaign, which we're going to continue to do, but have been committed to BARD without having gone here and without having a nostalgic or family relationship. So our family that did go here and that has a real connection, your loyalty and participation is crucial. It gives those who are in the capacity to do more. Everybody said, well, what is my check for $10 going to do? My family gives to BARD, and we don't have enough zeros to put on it. But the fact that we do makes an impression on the person who has more zeros to put. If we don't give, they're not going to give. So we are actually the community to which they look for support and in which they are proud to take leadership. So we have to keep that community alive and together.
Well, Leon, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you to everyone who joined. I think we could do, this wasn't very difficult. We could do this once a week.
Absolutely, love to.
All right, well, stay safe out there, everybody. And
everybody stay safe.
Get a hold of all of us. Okay,
thanks.
take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.